I'll never forget the moment I realized my entire family believed I was a thief. Standing in my parents' living room, surrounded by the people who were supposed to know me best, I watched as they looked at me with eyes full of disappointment and disgust. My sister Rachel sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face, playing the victim so convincingly that I almost doubted my own innocence. Almost. What I didn't know then was that the truth has a funny way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm Emma, the older sister by 3 years. Growing up, Rachel and I were close, or at least I thought we were. We shared secrets, clothes, and dreams about our futures. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, beautiful, charismatic, and seemingly perfect. I was the responsible one, the steady presence who got good grades and stayed out of trouble. Our parents owned a small but successful accounting firm. They'd worked their entire lives to build something stable for our family. Dad was the numbers guy, always buried in spreadsheets, while Mom handled client relationships with her warm smile and endless patience. They taught us the value of hard work, honesty, and family loyalty. Rachel and I took different paths after high school. I went to a state university, studied business administration, and got a stable job at a marketing firm. Rachel pursued her passion for photography, though her career never quite took off the way she'd hoped. She bounced from one freelance gig to another, always struggling to make rent. Our parents helped her financially, of course. They always did. I never resented Rachel for needing help. Family takes care of family. That's what I believed. When she called me crying about being short on rent, I'd send her money. When she needed equipment for a job, I'd help her out. I loved my sister, and I wanted to see her succeed. That's why what happened next cut so deeply. It started 6 months before that terrible confrontation in the living room. Rachel had been acting strange, distant, secretive. She'd dodge my calls and give vague answers when we did talk. I chalked it up to stress. She'd mentioned landing a big photography contract, something that could finally give her career the boost it needed. Then came the family dinner where everything fell apart. Mom had invited everyone over for Sunday lunch, something we tried to do at least once a month. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The atmosphere felt heavy, charged with tension. Dad couldn't look me in the eye. Mom's smile was forced, brittle. Rachel sat at the table, her eyes red and puffy. "We need to talk," Dad said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" Rachel burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I should have said something sooner, but I was scared." I didn't want to believe it. I looked around, completely lost. "Believe what? What are you talking about?" Mom reached across the table and took Rachel's hand. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You did the right thing telling us. Will someone please tell me what's happening?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. Dad pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were bank statements, his and Mom's personal accounts. Several large withdrawals were highlighted in yellow. Thousands of dollars, taken over the past several months. Rachel discovered these transactions, Dad said quietly. She was helping me organize some paperwork for tax season when she noticed the discrepancies. My heart was racing. "Okay, but what does this have to do with me?" Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, I saw you. 3 months ago, I stopped by your apartment unannounced, and I saw Mom and Dad's checkbook on your kitchen counter. I didn't want to think anything of it at the time, but then I found these withdrawals." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. "You think I stole from you?" I looked at each of them, waiting for someone to laugh, to tell me this was all a misunderstanding. Nobody did? "The timing matches," Dad said, and I could hear the pain in his voice. "The withdrawals started around the time you mentioned having financial trouble with your car repairs and that medical bill. I never took your checkbook. I never stole anything." My voice cracked with desperation. "Then how do you explain this?" Mom pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was her checkbook, sitting on a kitchen counter that looked similar to mine. "Rachel took this picture when she visited you." I stared at the photo, my mind spinning. That wasn't my counter. The tile was different. The backsplash color was wrong. But in the moment, under all that pressure and accusation, I couldn't articulate it clearly. "I know it looks bad," Rachel said, wiping her eyes, "but I can't keep lying to protect you. Mom and Dad have worked too hard to have their own daughter steal from them." The betrayal was suffocating. "I didn't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't understand why you're lying, Rachel, but I didn't do this." "Don't make this worse by blaming your sister," Dad said firmly. "She's the one who brought this to our attention. If she wanted to hurt you, she wouldn't have given you a chance to come clean first." That's when it hit me. Rachel had been setting me up. The distant behavior, the secretiveness. She'd been planning this. "We want you to pay back what you took," Mom said, tears in her eyes. "And we think it's best if we have some distance for a while, until you're ready to take responsibility for what you've done." I left that house feeling like my entire world had collapsed. My own family believed I was a thief. My sister had looked them in the eyes and lied, and they'd believed her without question. The next few weeks were torture. My parents wouldn't answer my calls. Extended family had clearly been told something because I suddenly got cold shoulders at my cousin's birthday party. My grandmother, who'd always been my biggest supporter, looked at me with such disappointment that I had to leave early. I felt completely alone, but I refused to accept this. I knew I was innocent, which meant Rachel had lied. The question was why, and how could I prove it? I started investigating, driven by hurt and determination. If Rachel had framed me, there had to be evidence. I began with that photo she'd shown our parents. I requested a copy, claiming I wanted to examine it more carefully. Mom sent it reluctantly. I studied every pixel of that image. The counter wasn't mine. I'd been right about that. The backsplash was beige. Mine was white subway tile. But whose kitchen was it? I enlarged the photo, looking for any identifying details. In the reflection of the toaster on the counter, I could barely make out what looked like a calendar on the wall behind whoever took the photo. Then I remembered something. Rachel had moved apartments about 4 months ago. I'd helped her pack, but hadn't seen her new place yet because she said it wasn't fully set up for visitors. I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Rachel's new apartment building and waited. I needed to see inside that apartment. After a few days of casual observation, I befriended her neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen who loved to chat. I mentioned I was Rachel's sister and we were planning a surprise for our mom. Would she happen to have any photos of the building's layout? The apartments were all similar, right? Mrs. Chen was delighted to help. She showed me pictures from her own apartment and mentioned that Rachel's layout was identical. The backsplash in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, and therefore Rachel's, was beige. My heart pounded. That photo had been taken in Rachel's kitchen, not mine, but I needed more. I needed to know about the money. I started thinking about Rachel's supposed big photography contract, the one she'd mentioned right before all this started. I reached out to mutual friends, asking casual questions about Rachel's work. One friend mentioned Rachel had been posting about a life-changing opportunity on social media around that time. I dug through Rachel's public posts and found it. A celebratory message about landing a contract with a wedding photography company. Dated exactly 1 week before the first large withdrawal from my parents' account, then I did something risky. I contacted the company, pretending to be a potential client interested in Rachel's work. The coordinator was friendly and told me Rachel had stopped working with them after just 3 weeks. "Between you and me," she said, "we had to let her go. There were some irregularities with her handling of client deposits." My blood ran cold. Rachel had been stealing from her clients. I gathered everything. The evidence about the photo, the timeline of Rachel's job, the information about the stolen deposits. Then I hired a private investigator. It cost me most of my savings, but I needed professional help. The PI was worth every penny. Within 2 weeks, he came back with a report that made everything click into place. Rachel had a gambling problem, online poker specifically. She'd racked up serious debt and had been desperate for money. The deposits she'd stolen from her photography clients hadn't been enough. She'd needed more. The PI found transaction records showing Rachel had made the withdrawals from our parents' account using checks she'd forged. She had access to their account information because she'd been helping Dad with paperwork. The signature analysis showed clear similarities to Rachel's handwriting attempting to mimic Mom's. But here was the kicker. Rachel had started planning to frame me months in advance. The PI found text messages between Rachel and her then-boyfriend, where she explicitly discussed how she could borrow money from our parents and make it look like I'd done it if she ever got caught. She'd planted the checkbook in her own apartment, taken the photo, and waited for the right moment to discover the missing money. I had everything I needed. I called a family meeting. I told them I had evidence to share and that Rachel needed to be there. My parents agreed reluctantly, probably expecting me to finally confess. We gathered in the same living room where I'd been accused. This time, I came prepared with printed documents, a laptop, and a quiet fury that had been building for months. "I know you all believe I'm a thief," I started, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "But I'm going to show you exactly what happened and who the real thief is." For the next hour, I laid out everything. The photo analysis showing Rachel's kitchen, not mine. The timeline of her failed photography contract and the stolen client deposits. The gambling debts. The forged checks. The text messages where she'd literally planned to frame me. I watched Rachel's face go from confused to pale to panicked. She tried to interrupt, to deflect, but I didn't let her. "The private investigator has already contacted the authorities," I finished quietly. "I wanted you to hear this from me first, as a family, before they reach out to you about filing charges against Rachel." The silence was deafening. Dad's hands were shaking as he looked through the documents. Mom was crying, but this time, she was looking at Rachel with horror and heartbreak. "Is this true?" Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "Rachel, is any of this true?" Rachel tried to maintain her innocence for about 30 seconds before she crumbled. The confession poured out. The gambling, the debt, the desperation, the calculation behind framing me. She'd chosen me because she thought I was successful enough to have access to money, and because she knew our parents would want to handle it privately to avoid scandal. "I was going to pay it back," she sobbed. "I just needed time. I thought I could win it back, and no one would ever have to know." I felt no satisfaction in watching her fall apart, only a deep, aching sadness for what she'd destroyed. That was 8 months ago. The aftermath wasn't clean or simple. Real life never is. Rachel entered a treatment program for gambling addiction. Our parents paid for it, because despite everything, they're still her parents. She's making progress, I'm told, though I wouldn't know firsthand. We haven't spoken since that day. Maybe we will someday, but not yet. The wound is still too fresh. My relationship with my parents has slowly been healing. They apologized, of course, long, tearful apologies that felt both necessary and insufficient. How do you apologize for believing your child is a thief? How do you apologize for choosing to believe one daughter's lies over another daughter's truth? I accepted their apologies because I love them, and because I understand that Rachel is very, very good at manipulation. But trust? That's something we're rebuilding brick by brick. And some days are harder than others. The hardest part wasn't the accusation itself. It was realizing that my family didn't know me well enough to see through the lie. That after 28 years of being the responsible one, the honest one, the reliable one, they could so easily believe I would betray them. That knowledge sits heavy in my chest. Even now, I've learned some painful lessons through this experience. I learned that being family doesn't mean automatic trust or unconditional loyalty. I learned that you can love someone deeply and still hold them accountable for the harm they cause. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of betraying you in ways you never imagined possible. But I also learned that truth matters. It's worth fighting for, even when everyone around you has accepted a comfortable lie. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. When my entire support system crumbled, when I stood alone against accusations from the people I loved most, I didn't break. I bent, I cried, I felt utterly lost, but I didn't break. I learned to trust myself. When everyone told me I was wrong, when the evidence seemed stacked against me, when it would have been easier to just accept blame for something I didn't do, I trusted my own truth. That's a power no one can take from you. These days, I'm rebuilding my life with new boundaries and clearer eyes. I'm still the same person I always was, responsible, honest, reliable. But now I'm also a little wiser, a little more guarded, and a lot more aware that family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and the willingness to seek truth even when it's uncomfortable. My parents and I have dinner together sometimes now. We talk about safer things, work, weather, the news. We're careful with each other, gentle, like we're learning each other all over again. Maybe that's what we're doing. Maybe that's what we need. I still don't know if Rachel truly understands the depth of what she did. The money can be paid back. She's on a payment plan to our parents, and she's facing consequences for the client deposits she stole. But how do you pay back someone's reputation? How do you restore months of sleepless nights, missed family gatherings, the whispers and sideways glances from relatives who heard some version of the story? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't fought back, if I just accepted the accusation, maybe even started to believe it myself. That's the insidious thing about lies. If they're repeated enough, by enough people you trust, they can start to feel like truth. But I did fight back. I stood up for myself when no one else would. And that's something I carry with pride. Even through all the pain, to anyone who's going through something similar, being falsely accused, watching people you love believe lies about you, I want you to know that you're not crazy. Trust your truth. Document everything. Stay calm, stay factual, and give people the chance to see the evidence. Some will and some won't. You can't control that part. But you can control whether you abandon yourself in the process. Your truth matters. Your integrity matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I still believe in family. I still believe in second chances and healing and the possibility of restoration. But I also believe in boundaries, in protecting yourself, in understanding that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Rachel stole money from our parents, but what she really stole was something much more valuable: trust, family bonds, years of relationship that can never be fully recovered. That's the real cost of her lie. That's what we're all living with now. Would I do anything differently? I don't know. Maybe I would have confronted Rachel privately first, tried to understand what was happening before it exploded into a full family crisis. Maybe I would have set better boundaries years ago when I first noticed concerning patterns in her behavior. Maybe. But I can't change the past. None of us can. All we can do is learn from it and choose how we move forward. I'm moving forward with my head held high, knowing I fought for the truth and won. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to live a lie. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's self-respect. That's survival. If my story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you've found value in this, consider subscribing to hear more family stories, the complicated, messy, real ones that remind us we're not alone in our struggles. The truth will always find a way to surface. Sometimes it needs help. Sometimes it needs someone brave enough to dig for it, even when that digging is painful and lonely and feels impossible. Be that someone. For yourself, for your truth, for your peace, because at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. Make sure the person looking back at you in the mirror is someone you can be proud of, someone who stood up, spoke truth, and refused to be broken by someone else's lies. That's my story. That's my truth. And finally, my family knows it too.